Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, a.k.a. PD Beats.
Hello and welcome to the Popternative Podcast. This is the podcast where we have digital discussions, the worlds of pop culture, social media, sports, everything really. As always, I'm your host, Peter Remoliotis, and on Twitter I go as PD Beats. Well, this interview is literally 3 years in the making. We've been trying to get this guest on for a long time. It's finally happening. He is an anchor on Sportsnet, and he's the author of Hockey Card Stories and Hockey Card Stories 2. Mr. Ken Reid is with us. Ken, welcome to Popternative.
Petey, I'm glad you stopped going through my people and just came to me directly. That's how we made this happen, right? If you go to my people, they're tough.
You just got to go directly to the source.
Go to the source, man. That's exactly what you do. And then the source in this case was me direct messaging you on Twitter. So, you know what? It worked out well, buddy. I just dropped my Eric Lindros rookie card. I had to pick it up.
Absolutely. So I want to know the exact moment where you decided that you wanted to write a book.
Okay. As a hockey nerd, as a kid, I consumed hockey books at an epic rate. I always wanted to write a book. My brother and I always wanted to write a book together. Always wanted to write a hockey book. Never really knew what avenue to take. But I was very passionate about hockey cards. Well, I'm a massive hockey card geek. I have like 50,000 of them. And as I got older, the cards started to look funnier, you know? Like, why is that guy's hair colored on his head? Or why is that uniform colored in? So I wanted to just, it was years ago now. I thought, geez, I wonder if that'd make a good book. And people kind of started getting this nostalgic take on cards from our era. And by my era, I mean the 80s and 90s. I mean, before the nostalgic cards were the 50s and 60s. But as you get older, you know, things from your youth turn into nostalgia. So I figured, you know what? I should call some players up and see what they think of their hockey cards. This was, 7-8 years ago. I might have started the first one. And first guy I called, and I knew he'd know about his card, was Joe Daly. He used to play in the NHL for Detroit and the WHA for Winnipeg. But the reason I knew that he'd know about his cards was he owned a card store in Winnipeg. He still does. So I called him, and I figured I'd just blog about it. And but I thought, you know what, maybe if I get enough blogs together, I can collect them into a book. So I mentioned it to Ian Mendez, and he says the first thing you have to do is find a literary agent. So I didn't know what that was. So he told me the name of his guy. I called the guy, and he said, yeah, that's a good idea for a book. I'll shop it. Huh? What? So then instead of just collecting 60 blogs or so, I had to write a book. So here we are. This is my fourth book now, which is insane. And it's a sequel. I'm hoping it's better than Caddyshack 2, because Caddyshack 2 is not good. Caddyshack 1 was awesome. If it's as good as Cannonball Run 2, I'll be pumped. Because Cannonball Run 2, solid.
It's a 50-50 with sequels.
It
around
is.
the board. It really is.
I wish it was like Lord of the Rings, right? It was a continuing story. The thing about this book is you didn't have to read the first one to read the second one. It's more like an encyclopedia collection. Your hip young viewers may not know what encyclopedias are, but these come out, and, you know, the first encyclopedia would be A. The second one would be B. You didn't have to read A to know B. So the stories in this book are just totally just by themselves. It's 59 individual stories, just like the first book. Mm-hmm. So if you didn't buy the first book, don't worry about it. A lot more boom era cards on this one. By that, I mean like the Lindros rookie, right? That was going to make everybody rich.
No, absolutely. I'm a proud owner of the first Hockey Card Stories book, and it's signed. So
I know. I gave one to you and your dad.
I know. Yeah, he saw, because he follows you on Twitter as well. He saw that you were making the sequel. He actually told me about it a couple of weeks ago. He's like, hey, Ken wrote a sequel to Hockey Card Stories.
Cool. We'll have to do one of those book fairs together again.
No, absolutely. And we'll get back into talking about the book momentarily, but let's go back to your other job, an anchor on Sportsnet.
Main job.
Your main job. Yeah, the job. You know what I mean?
The reason I'm sitting on this couch, because I wouldn't be able to afford it through the book. Main job.
Exactly. I mean, what kind of made you decide that you wanted to go into broadcasting and specifically doing highlights, Ken?
Well, I've told this story many times, and it's as simple as this. When I was 8 years old, I got cut from the Novice 1 team in Pictou, and that's when I discovered I wasn't going to play in the NHL, because up until then, my career path was to play in the NHL. And I thought, I'm not going to play in the NHL, but I still love the game. And I remember watching a game with my dad. It was a baseball game. So tryouts probably were in October or something. And my dad said, well, the guys announcing the game, they get to go to all the games. They get in for free. And boom, this light went on in my head that I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. So it was kind of a far-fetched idea. So then I remember thinking maybe I'll be a physiotherapist for a while, grade 9. And because my dad was a doctor, but there was a problem. I wasn't very good at school and I didn't like science. So I wanted to be a sportscaster. I figured the odds were slim, but my family supported me. And I always wanted to be a play-by-play guy. Still think I'm a play-by-play guy at heart in a lot of ways, because I like to ad-lib my highlights a lot. So that was that. I pursued a career in journalism and worked my way across Canada. Started for a whopping $8 an hour at Access Cable 10 in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, a job I'm still very grateful for to this day. Cut my teeth and moved across the country and ended up at Sportsnet. Thankfully, it's a place I love. Ended up there a little over 7 years ago, almost 7 years ago, and it's just worked out. I don't know why, but they gave me a chance to, I guess, run with the ball, and had some good blockers, picked up a couple yards, so it's a good team, and it's worked out well.
Talk a little bit about the evolution of sports highlights in terms of the last 5 years. I mean, social media has become a big component of that, on how sports news is presented, and the anchor showing highlighted tweets. Talk a little bit about what has changed and what has become more impactful in terms of reading sports highlights, Ken.
Well, yeah, that's a great question, because as we know, people can get them on their phone. I still think there's an appetite. I think there's a large appetite for people that just want to sit down and watch a highlight show. They just want their highlights. They don't want to go digging from Twitter account to Twitter account, or from NHL.com to NFL.com to Sportsnet.ca looking for stuff. So I think there's an appetite for that. And I think we often think that there isn't an appetite for that, because things have evolved so fast. We'll put tweets into a highlight pack, and if we get a goal, if we're on live TV on Sportsnet Central and there's a goal in a Flames-Oilers game during the playoffs, if they ever met in the playoffs again, boom, we can have that up instantly because of the technology we have. Before it was very linear. It was just, here's the start of the game, go to the end. But you can get a lot more creative now, with, athletes tweeting out their feelings, or Instagram or whatever. So the way highlights are told, to me, at its purest form, it should be a story. A highlight pack should be a story. They were always told via a story. So just the elements that we can put in the story have changed thanks to social media.
Absolutely. And you mentioned before, I met you at a book fair in Toronto with my dad, and I find that whole industry of events, book fairs, conventions, Comic-Cons, that's just an industry that, not saying it hasn't been popular in the last couple years, but I feel like there's been a big boom in the last 2 years. There's so many of those events, especially when I have a lot of geek culture, pop culture, comic book guests on the show. We talk about that. I see the same thing in sports as well. There's a lot of conventions, a lot of I saw there's hockey card conventions. There's so many of those conventions out there these years.
I can't believe the way the Comic-Con thing has taken off just in the last 3 years in Canada. I mean, it seems like every town has them now, right?
Every town.
Pat Mastrioni, I know, who played Joey Jeremiah. He's appearing at them all the time now. There's these Degrassi ones. He was just down the street here the other day in my neighborhood in Toronto. And there's always been hockey and baseball card shows. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, they've kind of remained the same. You have autograph guests, and you have dealers. What I can't get over is just the explosion of the Comic-Con stuff. It kind of reminds me of what baseball and hockey cards went through in the 1990s. There seems to be a boom era for that. They're everywhere. It's funny. I won't name the actor, but I ran into an actor about 6 months ago, and we got to talking, and he was on a pretty popular series. And, he said, I'm not doing much acting now. I said, did you ever think of doing this Comic-Con stuff? There's money to be made. He's like, you serious? I hooked him up, and boom, within a week, he got a gig at one of these Comic-Cons doing a signing. So it seems to be the boom era for that. I would like to see the baseball and hockey card shows take a slice from the Comic-Con world and just make it more interactive, because it seems the people that go to the Comic-Con things, they get a lot of interaction with the guests and things like that. I'd like question and answer panels, things like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'd like that make its way into the sports card world. Now, I don't know if sports card collectors would be as interested in that as the Comic-Con folks, but I think there's an appetite out there for it for some people. I mean, I'd be interested to ask, Bobby Hall a question, say if he's appearing at a signing. So I think the Comic-Con thing, man, they're really showing that these conventions can be done in a different way, because for the most part, the sports card world conventions, they've kind of remained the same.
No, for sure. That's interesting. So here's a question for you now. So you said you've written 4 books. This is a question I have. It's a 2-part question. So basically, any project you're gonna have goals. Every project's gonna have a different goal. Every experience is going to have learning experiences, whether you've been doing it for many years or a short amount of time. You're always going to have experiences. So I want you to go book by book, and I want you to talk about the initial goal you had in mind for that book, whether it was, getting used to writing, you know what I mean, getting a specific message out, and then the learning experiences that came from that book and that experience with that book, Ken. So go through them all.
So the first Hockey Card Stories book, Hockey Card Stories, I wanted it to just be common cards. Guys that the average fan didn't know about. In order to get a publishing deal, I needed some big names in there.
Yeah.
So the goal of that book was to let people know that, let's say, Paul Harrison, you might just flip over this card in a book, but I wanted people to know that the guy on this card has a story to be told. And it's not just a card you flip through, right? That there's a story behind this card. So I got that out of the book, and I put some big names in the book as well. So that is what I wanted to get out of that book. And what I learned mostly from Hockey Card Stories is writing a book is not easy, but it's kind of fun. It's kind of rewarding. So that prompted me to say, okay, I'd like to write a second book. The second book was much along the line of the first book, in that guys that you just pass off, I wanted you to know that they have a story. So I wrote a book about guys who played one game only in the NHL, just one game. No more, no less. It was called One Night Only. What I learned from that book is that guys who played just a single game in the NHL, and I wanted this to be sincere, because I meant, man, you played a game in the NHL. I meant it as, you played a game in the NHL. Whereas other people would say, oh, you only played one game. I think playing one game is an incredible accomplishment. I wanted people to know that. And I think the guys in the book, some of them were a little dismissive of me. You really want to enter me? I only played one game. I think the guys in the book were very proud of themselves. Most of the guys who made it one game. No, but I thought a lot of guys would be bitter, but a lot of guys were not bitter. They might have been bitter for a bit, but now they've realized what they did was a special accomplishment. So from that book, I realized that probably whatever journey you take, you should accentuate the positive of it, because most of these guys who played one game in the NHL, they were really proud of themselves, and they deserve to be. My third book was with Dennis Marouk. Dennis is one of just 20 people to score 60 goals in an NHL season. So from that book, I'd met Dennis through doing my first Hockey Card Stories book. And from that book, I wanted people to know who Dennis Marouk was and what an accomplishment he made when he scored 60 goals in 81-82. Because the name of the book is Dennis Marouk, The Unforgettable Story of Hockey's Forgotten 60-Goal Man. And then through Hockey Card Stories 2, much like Hockey Card Stories 1, I just wanted guys to get their stories out there. And I really wanted to talk to Wayne Gretzky for it, because I wanted to link the story of my search for his rookie card as a kid and get his take on it. So I did that. But I guess throughout this entire process, I've learned that hockey players are pretty down-to-earth, decent men. And there's a lot more to them than just their stats and their pictures on hockey cards or in the NHL guide and record book. As all of us, there's a lot more to every person you see. There's a guy working construction across the street right now. They're redoing a house. There's a lot more to him than just being a carpenter. So we all have a story to tell. That's kind of what I learned from my books. I knew that going in as a journalist, but it's really been confirmed by doing these 4 books.
Awesome. Now this is like a signature, hallmark segment question on the show. I always ask about misconceptions of the industry, because when I started Popternative, you might remember, I was you were actually one of the first people that I picked your brain a little bit about starting a podcast. And, you know, one thing that we talked about was kind of like the behind the scenes, getting stuff that other people, like conversations, and getting, you know, these digital discussions that other people, you know, might have a hard time getting, you know, finding out. So I always ask about misconceptions, Ken. So I'll ask, you know, whether it's a musician, an actor, a hockey player, misconceptions of the industry. You know, Sheldon Surrey, we had him on the show. I asked him misconceptions. He said his misconception was everyone just kind of said, you know, shut up, you're just a hockey player, you don't know anything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the entertainment industry, in the acting industry, there's a lot of misconceptions. Like the misconception that if you're on a big show, even if you're on 3 or 4 episodes, you are like very well to do, making a lot of money. And a lot of these actors and actresses are like middle class actors and actresses that are doing well, but are not like superstars like a lot of people think they are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then we're both kind of wrestling fans. Big misconception wrestling is a guy like Kevin Owens shows up to WWE. Wow, I've never seen this guy before. He's been doing it for over 10 years.
Correct.
So for the sports broadcasting world, what are some misconceptions, Ken?
That it's easy. That's the first misconception, that it's easy. That I might have an easy job. In broadcasting, it's kind of a compliment when people think it's easy, because that means you're doing it well, right? It's pretty funny. I mean, it's not rocket science. You're not saving lives, but it's not easy. Much like you said about Kevin Owens, all the best broadcasters have put in their time as well. Wrestling, broadcasting, and comedy. You know, stand-up comedians, they put their time in. My brother's a stand-up. He puts his time in. He'd be a good guest, by the way.
We'll have him on. I'll have him on.
Wrestlers put their time in. Most good broadcasters have worked really small markets. They put their time in. They've made mistakes. So by the time they get to the big stage, much like Kevin Owens, it looks easy. So if someone tells you your job's easy as a broadcaster, it's a misconception, but it's also a compliment, because we'll do tours, studio tours, and people come in and try to read highlight packs. It's hilarious. But then again, if I went on a tour of a dentist's office and I tried to do a root canal, it'd be hilarious too. So, a big misconception of our job is it's easy. Another misconception of our job is we get free tickets. I get lots of requests for free tickets. I don't get free tickets. I'm going to get a ton of requests for Leafs tickets this year. Good luck. I won't. So it's easy, and we get free tickets. That's I guess the biggest. Oh, and that we just read the teleprompter, right? That's of course the gift.
I've heard that one before. I've heard that one definitely. I bet the best one was we had Casey Middlestat right before he was starting in Minnesota. He says, you know, the big misconceptions too is we don't do anything else but hockey. That was the one I liked the most. Like, you're a hockey player. You don't have to go to school.
Yeah,
you don't have to, even though you play in NCAA at the university, you don't go to school.
Well, I had to go to class. Yeah. But I'll tell you this: the misconception that we just read the teleprompter. You know, the Ron Burgundy scene.
Oh yeah.
The turning point in Anchorman, and Ron Burgundy's addicted to the teleprompter. I will confess this: there are some anchors out there that are addicted to the teleprompter.
No, absolutely.
Hopefully not to the Ron Burgundy degree, but there are some anchors that are addicted to the teleprompter. If it was up to me, I mean, I love doing just ad lib and just flying off the cuff of my pants. The teleprompter should just be a guide. So
absolutely.
In my ideal world, that's it. But yeah, teleprompter, free tickets, and it's easy. Those are
sure. A bunch of misconceptions. Absolutely. Ken, we'll wrap up, but thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Petey, thanks, man. I regret taking me this long. My brother would be an awesome guest. He'd enjoy this.
No, we'll have him on for sure.
But yeah, enjoyed talking to you. Enjoyed talking about the book, and it's available now in bookstores everywhere or Amazon.ca. Pick it up. It's wait for the reveal. Hockey card stories too. With a forward by Sidney Crosby and Chris Carlin.
Really?
Yes, Sidney Crosby did the forward. I'm thrilled to announce that. He was very, very kind of Sid to do the forward.
You did it quick. Put the cover up again. You did it really quick. I don't think they.
Yeah, there's the Sidney Crosby part. Can you see the Sidney Crosby part?
Oh
there?
Yeah, very cool. No, it's
sniping on the back in the old driveway back in Pictou, Nova Scotia.
I gotta say a quick shout out to Harry Sanders, who is playing in the MJHL for Pictou County now. So
he's playing for the Crushers.
He is.
Where's he from?
He is from Orleans, Ontario, Ottawa.
In Ottawa. How do you end up with Crushers?
I don't I don't know, but he didn't even tell me. He was playing for Navan Grads and went to training camp a little bit, and I just saw a photo. He's playing for the Crushers. So
cool. They just had Brian Burke at a fundraiser down there last night. Berkey was down there. So, he'll have a great time in the Maritime League. I used to do, my first gig was doing play-by-play in the Maritime League for the then Dartmouth All Exports.
So I did play-by-play for his old team. They were Cumberland Grads, now they're the Navan Grads.
That's right. Are you still doing play-by-play?
Might get back into it. I miss it. It's so much fun. Like it's amazing.
It's the closest thing you can be to being a player, I think. Right?
I love it.
Right?
It's amazing. And junior hockey is one of the best products out there. One of the most underrated products. It's awesome. No, I'm not even talking CHL. I'm talking like Junior A, like that stuff. Like it's amazing hockey.
You know what else is, I think, the most underrated hockey in Canada? CIS. You go down and watch Acadia play the University of New Brunswick one night, or the University of Ottawa play, Trois Rivières. It's nuts. It's really good hockey. Really good hockey.
Absolutely. And Ken, where can people follow you on social media?
Sure. Twitter account is @SN Ken Reid. That's all I have. I'm not an Instagram guy, but @SN Ken Reid. And tweet away. Ask me some questions if you have any questions about the book or anything. Have at her. But if you or anybody who played hockey cards in the 1990s, boom, I think you'll like the book. It's a little trip down memory lane.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Wish you all the best with the book and Hockey Card Stories 2. Well, and you should also pick up the first Hockey Card Stories. I think there would be a nice little back-to-back there.
Absolutely. And tune in weeknights, 10 Eastern, Sportsnet Central with Ivanka and I. We're on after the Leafs games or Blue Jays games or Senators games or whoever's playing. So we have a lot of fun coming out of that, and we're just ripping through highlights and just having a good time. We don't, I think sports should be fun. There's serious times, but just two dudes just sitting watching the highlights. We get them the same time you get them, so we just read through them and voila. Have some fun.
That might be a little misconception too, because you're getting about the when you're getting the highlights.
That's a huge one. You know what, PD? That's a good point, because we'll give people tours of our studio because, we do the 10 o'clock show, right? So we're right out of games. Yeah. We don't get to see our highlights before you do. So that's called reading them cold. The printer literally comes off beside us. We pick the printer up and boom, we see the highlights when you see the highlights. And that's one thing I really like about our show, the time slot, because it does remind me of being a play-by-play guy in a bit, because it's literally unfolding before my eyes. Now I'll have a hint as to what's happening, but I see him when you see him for the first time, which is a lot of fun. And makes for some fun mistakes sometimes too.
It does, for sure. Well, Ken Reid on Popternative, Hockey Card Stories, and Hockey Card Stories 2. Be sure to get them. YouTube.com/Popternative for previous episodes, Popternative. iTunes, Spotify for the audio versions. Until next time, this is Ken Reid and Peter Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.